Hi, I'm Kat, the apprentice maven. I know some things and I'll teach you, but I don't know a lot more things and I'll also teach me. This video is on sewing tools of the trade, but first, two disclaimers. You don't need all this stuff. Most of this video will cover things that are nice to have and will make your sewing life a little easier, quicker, and so on. Number two, this is the stuff that I have accumulated over a couple of decades of sewing, and there are a lot more tools and gadgets out there, so find what works best for you. The first section is going to be on cutting tools. These are fabric scissors. Sometimes you'll hear them called fabric shears. That has to do with the length of the blades, and some people get up in arms about the distinction. As long as they cut my fabric, I kind of don't care. This pair is spring-loaded, which I find is much easier on my hands, especially when I'm doing a lot of cutting or selecting a thicker fabric like denim or canvas. These are scissors that used to be used for fabric many, many moons ago, and they dulled over time, so now they're just for paper. Nothing wears out scissors like paper, so you never want to use your fabric scissors for anything other than fabric. Have a separate pair of scissors just for patterns and other paper. Incidentally, you don't have to give up on dull blades and turn them into paper or craft scissors. You can get your scissors professionally sharpened. Check with your local fabric store. Many of them schedule a craftsman to come at regular intervals, and you can schedule an appointment. These are also spring-loaded fabric scissors, but this steeper angle here helps keep the bottom edge of the blade on the table, which is really important for accurate cutting. When you raise the fabric off the table, the pattern could move, and if you're cutting multiple layers of fabric, the bottom one will move, making your cuts inaccurate. These are my thread snips. The most important thing is that these need to be the sharpest sharp that ever sharped, because the cleaner an edge you can get on your thread, the easier it will be to thread your needle. There are lots of different styles of snips. Lots of folks have this funny retro kind, but I just found out they actually make a unicorn now. This pair is also spring-loaded, which I love. But if you get these, just be careful you close them all the way. Twice now I've had them sproing open, sending my entire box of pins flying all over the room. These are my rotary cutters. The large one is great for projects with straight lines like bags or kimono or quilting. It is so much faster than scissors and much easier on my hands. The smaller rotary cutter does a better job at doing tighter curves and corners. If you're going to be using rotary cutters, a cutting mat is a must. Otherwise, you'll end up cutting your table or floor or whatever you're cutting on, and you'll be a very sad panda. This is my straight edge and also happens to be my favorite ruler as well. It's great for long straight cuts with the rotary cutter. I like that it's clear, which makes it easy to line up where you want it and run the blade right down the side of the ruler. Everyone, no matter your skill level or how long you've been sewing, absolutely everyone makes mistakes. Everyone rips out seams. The only real difference is that experienced sewers don't feel bad about it. You will need a seam ripper. And in the spirit of ripping seams, this is a single-edged razor blade, and it's more of an advanced sewer thing. I didn't use one of these until I worked in the costume shop of Colonial Williamsburg for a summer. These are way faster than a seam ripper, but you have to be super careful not to damage your fabric. Regardless of your level of experience, if you're not comfortable with the idea of using one of these, do not use it. So, the bare essentials that you would need from this category to get started with sewing. You're going to need fabric shears, you're going to need paper scissors, you're going to need a seam ripper, and you're going to need some snips. This next section is all about hand sewing tools. First up, thimbles. This is a regular metal thimble. It comes in a variety of sizes. If your fabric store doesn't have a bunch of sizes, and they usually don't, you may need to find a seller online who can help you size yourself appropriately and buy one that will fit you. This green thimble is a different style. The darker side you can see is flexible and has holes for breathability. The lighter side has hard plastic with little indentations for the back of the needle to rest in, so you can push it through the fabric. I had to buy a smaller size online because my local store didn't have the right one, and just like the metal thimbles, you should be able to shake your hand without it flying off. My favorite is this one. It's open at the top, which works better for me than a traditional thimble because I have longer nails, and it's adjustable on the back, which I also really like because I wear mine on my ring finger rather than on my middle finger like most people. This is because I hold my needle a little differently. Rather than using just my thumb and first finger, I prefer having more control of the needle by using my thumb and first two fingers. Then I put the eye of the needle against one of these little divots and use that to push through the fabric. These are a variety of needles. When you're first starting out, you don't need to spend a lot getting the super high quality fancy needles. Whatever you can find in your local store will be just fine. Just know that if you buy the giant pack of them, you're probably going to end up using maybe 5 or 6. These little guys here are called sharps, and that's what you should look for, though they might just be packaged as needles in your store. I store mine on a magnet like this. I just have a scrap of interfacing, but you can use whatever's handy. And I put the needle through the fabric and the magnet holds it in place. So when I put it away in the drawer with the rest of everything I'm storing, I can be confident I won't accidentally stab myself on one of these. Sometimes, when you have a needle with a smaller eye, it can be a little hard to thread, so you can reach for this little tool. It has this flat part and the wire diamond part. You stick the wire part through the eye of the needle and then put the thread through the wire diamond. Then pull the whole thing through the eye of the needle. You can't use a needle with an eye that's too tiny or it won't be able to fit both sides of the diamond and the thread through the hole. I personally find them to be a little bit more trouble than they're worth, but I have a feeling that as my eyesight worsens over time, I may need to invest in a couple more of these. A lot of sewers use wax to help condition the thread and keep it from tangling and knotting. It's what I used for years and years, and my grandmother taught me to use it, especially to help thread a particularly ornery needle. It's commonly available and comes in a variety of shapes and sizes and types of wax. However, my preference is Thread Magic. This is not sponsored. Thread Magic has no idea who I am, but I love this stuff. I feel like it makes the thread run through the fabric smoother and prevents more tangles than the wax, especially when I'm using regular old run-of-the-mill thread that you can get in the fabric store, which is usually a polyester blend. That said, if you find yourself using cotton, linen, or silk threads, as many of our historic sewists do, you may find something else you like better. Try some stuff out. See what you like best. If you find yourself in need of sewing a button back onto a coat or a pair of pants, you may want to have a toothpick. What this does is help you leave enough space between the button and the fabric to create a thread shank, so there's enough space for the thick wool of your pea coat, and you don't have to spend all your time fighting your buttons. You'll want to get the round kind. The flat kind tend to be more flimsy and don't work as well for this. See my How to Sew a Button video for details on this process. This next one's a little strange, but needle nose pliers. Hopefully there won't be too many applications in your sewing life for these, but I'll be the first one to admit that after sewing for a few hours, sometimes I just don't have the hand strength to pull the needle through when it gets stuck. So I'll clamp on the sharp end with my pliers and pull it the rest of the way through. In this category, the bare essentials for hand sewing are needles, a thimble, and Thread Magic. The next category is marking tools. You're going to need to mark fabric at some point, whether you're transferring marks from a pattern or you're draping on a mannequin. Sometimes the perfect marking tool is just a regular old pencil or pen. These are great for mock-ups or when you know it won't show on your finished project and it won't damage your fabric. My favorite marking tool is this chalk pen with a wheel by Clover. It has loose chalk on the inside that's distributed by the little metal wheel inside the tip of the pen. It comes in a variety of colors, so you can switch it out when you have a project with a lighter fabric. I will say it tends to spew chalk a little unevenly sometimes, but usually it leaves me with a much more accurate line than most of my other temporary marking tools. This is another mechanical pencil, but it also has Taylor's chalk inside. I bought it hoping it would be a great replacement for the chunk of Taylor's chalk I'd been using. I find that it drags and pulls my fabric, so I'm not a huge fan. It does also come in a variety of colors, but I just have the white one in here for now. Tailor's chalk is also very easy to find and easy to use. It's a great thing to start out with. But I don't really care too much for Tailor's chalk. As you can see, it gets dull very quickly, leaving thicker marks, which is less accurate. You can sharpen it, but I don't like the idea of wasting all that chalk, and I haven't really worked out a clever way to solve that problem yet. My newest addition is this fine tip disappearing ink marker. This one is a dark purple, but it also comes in light blue and it's water soluble. So when I'm finished with the mark, if there's any chance it will show, a little water takes it right off. Occasionally you'll see a mark come back, but just wet it again and it disappears. You just want to make sure that you're testing it in a place on your fabric that won't show. The bare essentials for this category, if I had to pick just two, I would pick the pencil and the Clover loose chalk wheel pen. If I could pick three, I'd add the disappearing ink marker. The next category is measuring tools, and this is, of course, in addition to the clear plastic ruler from earlier. This is a seam gauge. It's a variable tool that lets you set a measurement, and because the slider stays in one spot, it's a lot faster than a regular ruler or measuring tape would be. You can use this to fold over your fabric at the hem to the desired width, and the slider helps you stay consistent across the entire hem. And when you get into bigger hems like circle skirts and the like, the time it'll save you will really start to add up. I also just discovered this kind, which I didn't know existed until I saw it on a vlog by Noelle from Costuming Drama, and I am super excited to get one for myself. A measuring tape is an absolute must. You'll need it to make sure your pattern piece is lined up with the selvage edge of the fabric, meaning it's on the grain of the fabric, which you'll want most of the time because that's the strongest direction with the least stretch. And you'll also need it to measure yourself or whoever you're sewing the garment for. Even if you're only making a bag, you'll need it to measure on yourself how long you want the strap to be when the bag is on your shoulder. They come in plastic versions and fabric versions, but they all eventually stretch over time. This one is my second one in about, 10 years or something like that, although obviously your mileage will vary depending on how often you use and or abuse yours. This small square ruler is the cousin of the longer plastic ruler from earlier. It's great for quilters, smaller projects, or when you have a small cutting space. This is called a French curve and is used for drafting pattern pieces and truing pattern pieces when you're draping a garment on a mannequin. The bare essentials in this category is just the measuring tape. The seam gauge would be a close second, but if the budget is tight, just stick with the measuring tape. The last category is our miscellaneous tools. These are straight pins. I like these quilting pins because they're a lot longer and easier to see against my hardwood floor when my spring-loaded snips twang open and send them flying. There are a lot of different kinds of pins. There are ones with heads made of glass or metal. There are also quilting pins that have a flat head on them, and there are regular sewing pins that are smaller than these with a much smaller head. I find them fiddly. I like these. Speaking of picking up pins that have been flung across the room, this magnetic wand is one of the best investments I ever made. It's extendable and finds my pins before I step on them. Side note, don't sew barefoot. I love these little clips for when I'm sewing delicate fabrics that mar easily, or leather or pleather when you really don't want to put holes in your fabric. I think they're commonly used for quilting, but what I love about them is that they're flat on one side, so they sit nicely on the table without lifting the fabric too much. Safety pins are a really good thing to have around. I most often find myself using them for fitting garments to myself or other people. It's a heck of a lot easier to shimmy yourself out of a garment you've just fitted when it's not riddled with straight pins. I've also used safety pins for a whole lot of other things, including pinning bag straps and other components together until I'm ready to add them to my project so nothing gets lost in the meantime. This is another essential. You need an iron. You're going to need to press seams open, and I often find myself pressing pattern pieces. Yes, you can iron paper as long as you don't use steam. Add fabric before cutting it out to remove creases and make sure it's completely flat so I get the best, most accurate cuts. Most people will use an ironing board, but if you're in a small apartment and don't have the space to set up a board, they do make ironing pads or mats that you can set up on the floor or a sturdy table. A screwdriver is also a really nice thing to have around. There will be times when your machine will jam. It happens to everyone, regardless of your experience level. And you'll need to take the plate off under the presser foot to get all the bobbin art out of there. I like this one because it has both a flat head and Phillips head, and it also has 2 different sizes. I think I got this one from Harbor Freight for free, or maybe a whole dollar with a purchase that I was going to make anyway. And it's actually one of my favorites. You may decide you want an awl. I like this one in particular because of how the ergonomic handle fits into my hand. I use mine mostly for helping to feed fabric under the presser foot of my sewing machine without getting my fingers uncomfortably close to the needle. But if you get into corsetry, an awl is really good for creating space within the weave of the fabric, so you can insert the grommets without cutting the threads of the fabric, which would weaken it and cause it to rip more often. These are my pattern weights, but you can use just about anything. Before I got these, I was using jar candles, a marble garlic smasher, my napkin holder, and a jar of peanut butter. I've seen folks get large washers from the hardware store, and I've seen people make them in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. Some are glass, some of them even have handles. I like pattern weights, particularly when I'm using my rotary cutter. They're a lot faster and easier on your hands than pinning, and because pins lift part of the fabric off the table just a little bit, it can distort the cut slightly. A lighter can be nice to have around, even though I don't smoke, because I use it to burn or melt the edges of synthetic ties. So if I'm making a bag and want to use webbing straps, I can melt the ends so it doesn't fray. Make sure you check the material content of your webbing though. Cotton will burn, but it won't melt, and burning won't stop it from raveling. An alternative to burning the edges is fray check. You can use this on your webbing, or if you've chosen 100% cotton webbing, this will work better than the lighter. This also works great on fabric as long as you don't care about the edge being a little crunchy. I used this on a costume once that I wanted to have a floaty hem, so I used this instead of turning it under, and it worked great. A word of caution though, this stuff is noxious, so make sure you're using it in a well-ventilated area and letting it dry completely. Sewer's aid is an absolute must if you're sewing fabrics that have glue on them, like glitter dot or other sparkly fabrics that look great on stage. The glue that's holding the shiny bits down will gum up your machine, causing bobbin art, torn fabric, and lots of cussing. All you need to do is put 1, maybe 2 drops of Sewer's aid on the needle of your machine, and it will enable your needle to travel through the fabric and glue easily and save you lots of tears. This is a tailor's ham. I'm not sure where my regular tailor's ham got to, but they typically look like this. Both of them are made to put your project on a curved surface for pressing. This is because the body is curved, and pressing seams flat on the curvy bits of a garment can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. The bare essentials in the miscellaneous category are pins, an iron, and an ironing board or pad or mat, whatever fits in your space. So that's it. I hope you found this helpful, but if you have a favorite tool that I haven't mentioned here, tell me about it in the comments. I'm a bit of a sewing gadget nut, and I love learning about what's out there. Till next time.